Now, the context thing at the bottom is what the gentleman earlier pointed out in terms of how you describe information. So if you go back to that Reuters financial, you know, it's in pounds sterling, it's for a specific period, it's got that's the context idea. So XBRL serves up that stuff just like the barcode does. The idea of a label is simply, you know, how you quickly describe it. The presentation concept is what I described earlier for the Korean Stock Exchange. It's what the human being sees for the label. The presentation idea, while it's showing one here in English, there's actually 15 or 20 in different languages behind that. So a consumer can look at something in English, they can also look at it in German or French or Spanish. So the presentation idea, especially for multinationals, is a very powerful concept. Now, for many of you, when you run that idea by your IT guys, here's what they're going to say. Well, we can already do that in SAP. Or we can already do that in Oracle. And they're exactly right. But you can't do it across SAP, Oracle, Excel, Adobe. That's the problem. So I can do it in a software application, but when I start moving the information between software applications, that's where I have a problem. XBRL solves that problem. Definitions is simply what is I'm looking at. It's a definition concept. Now, I left the best two for last. The one at the bottom, the formula, that to me is probably the most powerful thing about XBRL. So we're going to take a company here in California. We'll take Intel, and I want to describe a modeling concept. Is there anybody who's familiar with, like, you know, financial models? Just need a volunteer. Okay, the gentleman in the back of the orange shirt. Thank you for volunteering. We're going to model Intel, and we're going to have one modeling concept, current ratio. You with me? So I'm going to tell you what my macro looks like. I have an Excel file. I assume you're going to use Excel. So I'm going to have a macro in my Excel file for current ratio. Here's what it looks like. I have a paren, D2 divided by F2. Closed paren, there's a division sign. That's what my macro looks like. Can you tell me what your macro looks like?
Well, if you're going to have to pull it off wherever it is, B3 on the Excel spreadsheet, you're going to have to divide it by, you know, VA or whatever.
That's right. Exactly right. So it turns out that this gentleman's, the setup in his file is a little different than in my file. My point here is that's the point. Okay, that's the point. We both understand the concept of current ratio. Everyone in the room understands that concept. But in each of our Excel files, we set them up differently. So a very basic concept like current ratio, we have to recreate it every time. Why can't we create it one time in a standardized way using the formula idea, publish it up here to this thing called a taxonomy, everybody in the room can reuse it? What about that? How does that change the way you work? What does that do for data quality? What does it do for your ability to share analytics across your whole firm? To use an analogy, this enables you to trade macros, change business rules, just like your kids exchange music files, except it's legal. Okay? It's legal. Again, some of you are sitting there thinking, Mike, this is fascinating theory. This is really interesting stuff. You're probably not thinking that, but I'm making it up. But it's never going to, I'm going to be retired or dead in the ground before that ever occurs. Again, you'd be wrong. Morgan Stanley rolled out a platform called Modelware that all their analysts use all over the world 3 years ago. Uses the concept right here. A company called Edgar Online, which makes, they're an intermediary. They distribute data they parse from Edgar. They rolled out a product called iMetrics. Uses the same concept. They did it 3 years ago. Just envision if you had thousands of analysts exchanging models, building them, and exchanging them with each other, just like music files. That's occurring right now today. Thousands of them are doing that. Yes, sir?
Okay, so let's look at this. You talked about Korea being a place that was using XBRL currently, right?
Yep.
And so if we take Hyundai, they're already on XBRL, and probably the Toyota is not because they're Japanese.
Yes, but the Japanese are actually using XBRL today as well.
Okay, so, but GM and Ford aren't using XBRL, correct?
We'll go with that, yes.
So
Ford actually is, but keep going.
okay, so we'd be in a position where, from an international standpoint, if you were going to analyze these companies and you were going to decide which one to invest in, other than reading the Wall Street Journal, which of course would tell you not to invest in GM or Ford right now, you could actually analytically look at the ones that were using XBRL and compare them beside each other in this kind of case. Is that correct?
That's correct, and you can do it very efficiently.
Okay, so then let's look at, if we're talking about XBRL, we really should be in a position, can you use XBRL with US GAAP currently?
Yes.
So when I'm going out and doing my next audit, I should input the information into XBRL. In fact, the California Society of CPAs, their financial statement that we just approved should be on XBRL. Is that what you're trying to tell us?
Yes.
Thanks.
The point I would make, though, to this idea is that Morgan Stanley rolled this out for all their investors, all their analysts 3 years ago, when literally no companies were reporting on XBRL, none, zero. So why did they do that? Well, because they already had a big warehouse with all this data that was already structured. The problem wasn't the data, it wasn't the reports. The problem was they have thousands of analysts with their business rules buried in thousands of Excel worksheets. So all their intellectual properties down in the worksheet layer, completely opaque to people in management, and when Johnny here walks out the door, salary leaves, and goes to another firm, they're hosed. That's the problem. How do you manage intellectual property? That's the issue. So how do you manage intellectual property in Excel worksheets in your own firm in terms of analytics? Another way to think about it is some of those are actually business rules, audit procedures. So there's more here than just the idea of analytics. You can also use these same concepts to test ledgers. I can show you a demo on that later, but let me keep going. The next point here is the references. Again, time for a quiz. The reference concept allows you to answer simple questions. Here's a question. What is the FASB standard for current deferred income tax assets? If you know the answer, raise your hand. I'm not going to ask you for the answer, just do you know the answer? Okay? We have a few here in that classroom that do. Well, the people who raise their hand, you're not my problem. You're not my problem. The people who don't know the answer, that's my problem. Now, you don't know the answer maybe because you haven't ever run into current deferred income taxes. You're a new staff person, you've never experienced it. Only the people with the gray and white hair have had that experience, or no hair. So that's the issue, is how do you ensure that everybody can have that experience? So if you don't know what the answer is, how do you get it? Well, we pick up my telephone, I call somebody, and they tell me the answer, I go searching around trying to find it. Why does it take that much time? Well, in the XBRL taxonomies, there's actually an explicit relationship, the reference concept, between every disclosure concept in FASB standards, Regulation SX, the IFRS bound volume. Okay? It could be to any concepts you want it to be. It could be to your own company's audit procedures, your audit manuals, your subject matter experts, yada, yada. It doesn't make any difference. And then it pops up just like you want it to when your people are looking at those financial statements. So think about this platform as a way to have pervasive knowledge management. In other words, anybody in your firm now knows what anybody in your firm knows. It's not isolated to just the person's knowledge. It's not implicit knowledge any longer, it's explicit.